factory floor fell silent as the massive door creaked open. Chun, a young worker with calloused hands and determination in his eyes, stood frozen. Before him loomed Han, the big boss, a mountain of a man whose reputation for cruelty had spread across the entire district like wildfire. "You think you can challenge me?" Han's voice rumbled through the warehouse. His expensive silk suit stretched tight across shoulders that had broken stronger men than Chun. "Workers like you are nothing but insects beneath my feet." Chen's fists trembled, but not from fear. For 3 months, he'd watched Han exploit innocent workers, steal their wages, and threaten their families. Today, someone had to stand up. Today, everything would change. But what Han didn't know was that Chun wasn't just another factory worker. Hidden beneath his modest clothes was a secret that would shock everyone in that room. Before we continue this incredible story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss these amazing tales of justice and courage. 3 months earlier, Chun had arrived at the Golden Dragon Ice Factory with nothing but a worn travel bag and hope for honest work. The factory stood in the poorest district of Bangkok, where desperate people took whatever jobs they could find. The building was old, with rusted metal walls and broken windows that let in the scorching Thai heat. Han controlled everything in this part of the city. The ice factory was just one of his many businesses, but it served a darker purpose. While workers thought they were simply cutting and delivering ice blocks, Han used the factory as a front for smuggling operations. Innocent employees had no idea what was really happening in the basement after their shifts ended. Chen's cousin, Chow, had worked at this factory for 2 years. Chow was honest, hardworking, and supported his entire family with his modest salary. He'd written letters to Chun about the terrible working conditions, the long hours without proper pay, and the fear that gripped every worker's heart. Then, 1 month ago, Chow disappeared. The official story was that Chow had quit and returned to the countryside. But Chun knew his cousin would never abandon his family without a word. Something terrible had happened, and Chun had traveled hundreds of miles to find the truth. On his first day at the factory, Chun kept his head down and observed everything carefully. The other workers moved like ghosts, silent, scared, and broken. They worked 12-hour shifts in the freezing cold, handling massive blocks of ice with bare hands until their fingers turned blue. Anyone who complained faced Han's punishment. Han ruled through fear and violence. He had a gang of enforcers who patrolled the factory floor, watching for any sign of rebellion. Workers who questioned their missing wages were dragged to Han's office. They always returned with bruises and empty pockets, their spirits crushed. Chun learned that several workers had vanished over the past year, including his cousin Chow. The other employees whispered about the disappearances, but never spoke openly. Fear had wrapped around their throats like invisible chains. What the workers didn't know about Chun would change everything. Back in his small village, Chun had spent years training in martial arts under a legendary master. His teacher had emphasized that true strength came from protecting the weak, not dominating them. Chun had promised to use his skills only when justice demanded it. He'd hidden his abilities perfectly, playing the role of a simple worker who struggled with the heavy ice blocks. But every night, alone in his tiny rented room, Chun practiced his techniques and prepared for the moment when he would confront the big boss. That moment came on a Wednesday afternoon when Chun finally discovered the truth about his cousin. The discovery happened by accident. Chun had stayed late to finish his shift when he heard strange sounds coming from the basement, a place workers were strictly forbidden to enter. The basement door was usually locked with 3 heavy chains, but tonight, one of Han's enforcers had left it slightly open. Chun waited until the factory grew quiet. His heart pounded as he slipped through the shadows, moving with the silent grace his martial arts training had perfected. The basement stairs creaked under his feet, each sound echoing like thunder in his ears. What he found in that basement would haunt him forever. Rows of wooden crates filled the underground space, but these weren't containers for ice. Chun pried one open and discovered packages wrapped in plastic, illegal goods that Han was smuggling across the border. The operation was massive, worth millions of dollars. But that wasn't the worst discovery. In the corner of the basement, Chun found a small room with a single desk. Papers were scattered across the surface, and among them, Chun recognized his cousin's handwriting. Chow had discovered the smuggling operation and documented everything in a detailed journal. The final entry made Chen's blood run cold. Han knows I found out about the basement. His men are coming for me tomorrow. If anything happens, someone must expose the truth and save the other workers from this nightmare. The journal ended there. Chen's hand shook as he realized his cousin had been murdered for trying to do the right thing. How many other workers had met the same fate? A sound from the stairs made Chen freeze. Heavy footsteps were descending. He'd been discovered. 3 of Han's enforcers appeared, their faces twisted with cruel smiles. The largest one, a brute named Scar, cracked his knuckles menacingly. Well, well, Scar sneered. Another curious worker who couldn't mind his own business. The boss is going to enjoy dealing with you. Chen backed against the wall, his mind racing. He could fight his way out, but that would reveal his abilities too soon. He needed more time to gather evidence and plan his next move carefully. I was just looking for the bathroom, Chen said, keeping his voice shaky and afraid. I got lost. Please, I won't tell anyone what I saw. Scar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Too late for that, friend. You're coming with us. They grabbed Chen roughly, dragging him up the stairs to Han's private office on the factory's second floor. The office was luxurious, a stark contrast to the miserable conditions of the factory floor. Expensive paintings hung on the walls, and Han sat behind a massive desk made of dark wood, smoking a cigar that cost more than a worker's monthly salary. Han studied Chen with cold, calculating eyes. So, you're the new worker who's been asking questions about Chow. I should have known you were related to that troublemaker. What did you do to my cousin? Chen demanded, his carefully maintained disguise of fear slipping slightly. Han smiled, revealing gold teeth that gleamed in the dim light. Chow made a mistake. He forgot that in this factory, I am the law. Workers who forget their place tend to have unfortunate accidents. The admission hit Chen like a physical blow. His cousin was dead, murdered by this monster who saw human lives as nothing more than obstacles to profit. You'll meet the same fate, Han continued casually, as if discussing the weather. But first, I think you'll work for me for a few months. You're young and strong. I can use you before disposing of you like I did your cousin. Rage burned in Chen's chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. This wasn't the right moment. Han was surrounded by enforcers, and Chen needed to expose the entire operation, not just get revenge. Over the following weeks, Chen endured hell. Han assigned him to the worst jobs, working 18-hour shifts in conditions that would break most men. The other workers pitied him, whispering that he wouldn't survive more than a month. But Chen wasn't just surviving. He was preparing. Every night, he gathered evidence. He photographed the smuggling operation using a small camera he'd hidden. He documented the stolen wages, the terrible working conditions, and the pattern of disappearances. He befriended other workers, slowly building a network of people who were ready to testify against Han if given the chance. Most importantly, Chen continued his secret training. In the dark hours before dawn, he practiced his techniques in the abandoned storage room, keeping his skills sharp for the inevitable confrontation. The breaking point came when Han targeted another worker, a young man named Ming, who had a pregnant wife at home. Ming had accidentally damaged a crate of smuggled goods, and Han decided to make an example of him in front of the entire factory. Gather everyone, Han ordered his enforcers. It's time these insects remembered who's in charge. The workers assembled on the factory floor, their faces pale with fear. Ming was brought out, already bruised from a beating. Han stood on an elevated platform, looking down at his terrified employees like a king surveying his subjects. This is what happens to workers who cost me money, Han announced, his voice echoing through the warehouse. He nodded to Scar, who stepped forward with a metal pipe. Chen couldn't stay silent anymore. The evidence was gathered. The workers were witnesses. The time for hiding was over. Stop! Chen's voice cut through the factory like a blade. Everyone turned to stare at him. Han's eyebrows rose in surprise. What did you say? Han asked, his tone dangerous. Chen stepped forward, his posture changing from the defeated worker he'd been pretending to be. His shoulders straightened. His movements became fluid and confident. The transformation was so complete that several workers gasped. "I said stop," Chen repeated, his voice steady and powerful. "Your reign of terror ends today, Han. I have evidence of your crimes, witnesses ready to testify, and the police will be here within the hour." It was a bluff. Chen hadn't contacted the police yet, but he needed to force Han's hand, to create a confrontation that would expose everything in front of witnesses. Han's face turned purple with rage. "You dare challenge me? Do you know who I am?" "You're a coward who preys on innocent people," Chen replied. "You're a murderer who killed my cousin and countless others. But most importantly, you're finished." The factory exploded into chaos. Workers began shouting, their suppressed anger finally finding voice. Han's enforcers moved to surround Chen, but several brave workers blocked their path. Han stepped down from his platform, his massive frame towering over Chen. "If you want to die like your cousin, I'll be happy to arrange it personally." Chen assumed a fighting stance, the first time he'd revealed his true abilities. "I'm ready whenever you are, big boss. Let's settle this once and for all." The legendary confrontation was about to begin, and the entire factory held its breath. The factory floor became an arena. Workers scrambled back, forming a circle around Chen and Han. The air crackled with tension as the two men faced each other. The corrupt boss who'd terrorized hundreds of people, and the young worker who'd been hiding extraordinary skills. Han moved first, his massive fist swinging toward Chen's head with enough force to shatter concrete. But Chen wasn't there anymore. He'd slipped aside with lightning speed, his movements so smooth they seemed almost casual. "Stand still, coward," Han roared, launching a combination of brutal punches. Chen's years of training took over. He ducked, weaved, and blocked with precise economy of motion. Han was strong, but his techniques were crude, relying on size and power rather than skill. Each of Han's attacks found only empty air while Chen studied his opponent's patterns. "You killed innocent people," Chen said quietly, his voice cutting through the sound of Han's heavy breathing. "You stole from families who were already struggling. You thought power made you untouchable." Chen's counterattack was devastating. A spinning kick caught Han in the ribs, with a crack that echoed through the warehouse. The big boss stumbled backward, genuine shock crossing his features. No one had ever heard him before. Scar and the other enforcers tried to intervene, but the workers blocked them. Years of suppressed rage had transformed the terrified employees into a united force. They weren't fighters, but together they formed a human barrier that kept the fight one-on-one. "This is for Chow," Chen said, unleashing a combination that would become legendary. His fists moved like lightning, precise strikes targeting pressure points with surgical accuracy. Han tried to defend himself, but Chen was fighting with the skill of a master and the fury of justice denied too long. A palm strike to the solar plexus drove the air from Han's lungs. A sweep kick took his legs out from under him. Before the massive boss could fall, Chen's spinning back fist connected with his jaw. Han crashed to the concrete floor, blood trickling from his mouth. For the first time in his life, he experienced fear. Chen stood over him, his breathing steady despite the intense combat. "It's over, Han. The workers are free, and you'll answer for your crimes." The factory erupted in cheers. Workers who'd been living in terror for years suddenly found their voices, shouting with joy and relief. Several of them had already called the police during the fight, and sirens could be heard approaching in the distance. When the police arrived, they found overwhelming evidence. Chen's photographs documented the smuggling operation. Workers came forward with testimony about stolen wages and terrible conditions. Most damning of all, they found Chow's journal in the basement, detailing everything Han had done. Han was arrested along with his enforcers. The police investigation would eventually uncover a criminal network that extended far beyond the ice factory. Dozens of victims would finally receive justice. As officers led Han away in handcuffs, the defeated boss looked back at Chen with hatred and disbelief. "Who are you really?" he demanded. Chen smiled quietly. "I'm just a worker who learned that true strength comes from protecting others, not dominating them. My teacher would be proud." 3 months later, the Golden Dragon Ice Factory had transformed completely. Under new honest management, It provided fair wages and safe working conditions. The workers no longer moved like frightened ghosts. They smiled, laughed, and took pride in their jobs. Chen stood in the factory yard, watching the sun set over Bangkok. Ming approached him, his pregnant wife beside him, both wearing expressions of deep gratitude. "Because of you, our baby will grow up in a world where courage matters more than fear," Ming said, shaking Chen's hand. "We'll never forget what you did for us." Chen had become a local hero, but he insisted he was just a regular person who refused to accept injustice. The story of how a simple worker had defeated the big boss spread throughout Thailand, inspiring others to stand up against corruption and abuse. The greatest tribute came when Chen visited his cousin's grave. He placed flowers on the headstone and spoke quietly. "Your death wasn't in vain, Chow. The truth came out, and the workers you tried to protect are finally safe. Rest peacefully, cousin. Justice was served." The real lesson of this story extends far beyond one factory in Bangkok. It's a reminder that bullies and tyrants only succeed when good people remain silent. Han had controlled the factory for years, not because he was unstoppable, but because fear had paralyzed his victims. Chen's courage started with a simple decision. He refused to accept injustice, even when standing up seemed dangerous. He gathered evidence, built alliances, and prepared carefully before taking action. When the moment came, his skills and determination proved stronger than Han's brutality. For all of us watching this story, the message is clear. Never judge someone by their appearance or current position. The quiet person beside you might possess extraordinary abilities and unwavering principles. Respect costs nothing, but arrogance always carries a price. Chen's martial arts skills were impressive, but his true strength came from his moral courage. He could have walked away from the factory, avoided danger, and lived a peaceful life. Instead, he chose to honor his cousin's memory by fighting for justice, even when the odds seemed impossible. The workers learned an equally important lesson. Unity creates power that individual fear cannot overcome. When they stood together to block Han's enforcers, they discovered strength they didn't know they possessed. Alone, each worker was vulnerable. Together, they became unstoppable. If this story of courage and justice inspired you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up against injustice? Your story might inspire others to find their own courage. Watch our next video where we explore another incredible tale of hidden strength and ultimate triumph. Remember, true heroes often wear ordinary clothes and work regular jobs. They're all around us, waiting for the moment when courage is needed most. The legend of Chun and the Big Boss reminds us that evil thrives when good people do nothing, but it crumbles quickly when someone brave enough stands up and says, "No more." What would you do in Chen's situation? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video if you believe courage can defeat corruption. The end.